I never thought a simple drive could become something that would haunt me for years. I was returning home from my late-night shift at the diner. The clock had just struck 2 a.m., and the highway was deserted. The city lights had faded behind me, and only the soft hum of my car engine and the rhythmic sweep of my windshield wipers filled the silence. It was raining lightly, the kind of drizzle that makes the roads shine like slick mirrors reflecting the scattered glows of distant street lamps. Normally, I loved driving alone at night. It was quiet, peaceful, almost meditative, but that night something felt off. I first noticed it when I saw the headlights, not the normal oncoming kind, but a single pair of them following me from the rearview mirror, too steady to be another car trying to pass. At first, I thought I was imagining things. Maybe it was a trick of the wet road or the haze from the rain. I slowed down, thinking it would pass me, but it didn't. It stayed there, a shadowy presence behind me, riding my tail like it had nowhere else to go. I tried to shake it off, reminding myself I had a long imagination and a long day. But the feeling in my stomach, the kind that knots and churns, told me otherwise. As the miles stretched, the headlights never moved. The road curved, dipped, and climbed, but they followed faithfully. Panic started gnawing at me. I tried taking exits, going through side streets, even looping back when I realized I might be near a stretch of road I didn't recognize. Every turn I made, the headlights were there. Always there. No other vehicles, no other signs of life. Just those two cold, steady lights locked on me. My pulse raced. I reached for my phone, intending to call someone, anyone, but the screen flickered and went dead. No signal. Nothing. Only the rain, my windshield wipers, and that unrelenting presence. I told myself to stay calm. Maybe it was a truck driver, some lost soul on the same deserted road. But then I noticed something impossible. Every time I blinked, or at least thought I did, the lights were closer. Not moving faster, just closer, like they weren't moving at all, yet somehow encroaching into my space. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles whitened. I turned my head slightly to get a better look, and that's when I realized there was no vehicle. No car, no truck, no shape at all, just the lights. Floating, perfectly aligned, staring. My breath caught in my throat. I slammed my foot on the accelerator, desperate to outrun something I didn't understand. The road seemed endless, a black ribbon twisting into the night, yet I couldn't escape the lights. They followed without sound, without shape, unwavering. That's when I saw movement in my side mirrors. Shadows. Figures. At first, I thought it was my reflection, or the rain playing tricks, but they were wrong. They moved independently, shifting and stretching in ways that shouldn't be possible. Tall, thin silhouettes that seemed to hover a foot above the asphalt, trailing the lights. One moment gone, the next closer, merging with the darkness yet somehow visible against it. I swallowed hard, heart pounding, mind screaming to wake up. My hands shook so badly I could barely keep the car straight. Then I heard it, a low metallic hum that vibrated through the entire vehicle. Not an engine, not any sound I'd ever heard on a road before. It was alive, conscious, watching. The hairs on my neck stood on end as the hum escalated, weaving into what sounded like whispers. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew I was being addressed. Not in language, but in intent. They were warning me, or maybe tempting me. My instinct screamed to turn around, to flee, but I knew somewhere deep down that escape was no longer an option. Suddenly, the road ahead split, and I was forced to choose left or right. Both directions were equally black, equally empty, and the headlights hovered just behind me, patient, silent. My mind raced. Logic failed. Memory failed. I chose right, a desperate gamble, hoping instinct might save me. The moment I did, the car shuddered violently. I slammed both hands on the wheel, trying to control it, and for a second I thought I was going to crash. But instead of hitting anything, the road opened into a small clearing surrounded by dense woods. Fog rolled in from the tree line, thick and unnatural, swallowing the edges of my headlights, and then I saw it. A figure stood at the edge of the fog. At first, I thought it was a person, but the proportions were all wrong. Its limbs were long, impossibly so, and it seemed to bend in ways that defied anatomy. Its face, or where a face should have been, was a blank pale canvas, smooth and featureless. The only recognizable feature was a pair of glowing eyes, the same unnerving lights that had followed me for miles. They were watching, unblinking, aware, and then it moved. Not running, not walking, but sliding, gliding across the asphalt toward me with a soundless grace. I hit the gas, desperate to escape, but the tires spun on the wet road and barely moved. The lights, the figure followed, closing in impossibly fast. Panic overtook me completely, a pure, raw terror that left no room for reason. I was screaming, my voice swallowed by the rain and fog, and then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the lights vanished. The road was empty. The fog thickened. My engine sputtered and died. I sat frozen, chest heaving, staring into the blackness where it had been. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time had lost meaning. I don't know how long I sat there, praying for morning, praying for reality, praying for anything. Finally, I forced myself to restart the car. The engine turned over, and I cautiously drove back the way I had come. The road seemed normal now, innocent even, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, that somewhere in the darkness the eyes were still there, waiting, watching, patient. I finally reached home just as the sun began to rise, painting the streets in gold and orange. I stumbled inside, soaked, trembling, and locked every door. I told no one. Who would believe me? A hallucination, sleep deprivation, exhaustion, they would say it was nothing. But I know what I saw. I know what followed me, and the most terrifying part, even in the daylight when I dared look at the road outside my window, I could swear I sometimes see two lights, hovering at the edge of the tree line, unblinking, waiting for nightfall. Weeks passed. I tried to forget. I drove in daylight. I avoided that road entirely, but it's impossible to erase. Every rainy night, every lonely stretch of asphalt, I feel it. The presence, watching, patient, calculating. I've never gone back there at night, and I never will. But sometimes when I close my eyes and the world goes quiet, I hear that hum again, low and metallic, and I swear I can hear whispers calling my name. And I know in some terrible corner of reality it's still waiting. I don't know what it wanted or why it followed me. I don't know if it was alive or dead or something else entirely. All I know is that night changed me. My sense of safety, of control, of reality itself shattered. I can't explain it. I can't rationalize it. And I have a sinking certainty that if I ever return to that road after dark, I won't just see the lights. I'll see it. The figure, the eyes, the patient, inescapable presence that has been stalking me, maybe for longer than I even existed. Some nights I lie awake, imagining that stretch of road. I imagine the headlights in my mirror, steady and unyielding. I imagine the figure gliding silently behind me, watching, waiting, and I know deep down that one day it will find me again, because it doesn't forget, it doesn't tire, and it never lets go. I never liked driving alone at night, but I had no choice that evening. My friend had called me urgently, asking me to come pick her up from the train station. It was nearly midnight when I left my apartment, and the streets were empty except for the occasional stray cat or the distant glow of a street lamp. The city had this eerie quiet after dark, like it was holding its breath. I had taken this route hundreds of times, yet that night something felt wrong, though I couldn't put my finger on it. The first sign that things weren't normal was the fog. It wasn't typical fog. It seemed to slither along the road, rolling in thick waves that made the headlights struggle to penetrate. The trees lining the highway appeared distorted, elongated by the mist, as if the world itself had stretched and warped. I slowed down, squinting through the windshield, trying to make sense of the shapes. That's when I noticed movement, not in the trees but on the road itself. Shadows flickered at the edges of my vision, vanishing whenever I looked directly at them. My stomach churned. I shook my head and muttered to myself that it was just my imagination, the fog playing tricks. The real terror began when I saw the first figure. It was standing in the middle of the lane ahead, completely still. At first I thought it was someone stranded, maybe a hitchhiker. I braked, swerving slightly to avoid hitting it. The car tires squealed on the wet asphalt, and I caught a full glimpse of the figure. It wasn't human, or at least it wasn't entirely human. Its limbs were too long, its posture awkward and unnatural, and its head tilted at an impossible angle. Even from a distance, I could feel its gaze, piercing, intelligent, alive. I slammed my foot on the gas and swerved around it, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. When I looked back, the figure was gone, vanished into the fog. I tried to laugh it off, shaking my head. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles whitening. Maybe it was a prank, some local kid playing with the shadows, or maybe it was exhaustion, my brain tricking me after a long day. But the feeling of being watched clung to me, sticky and cold. I glanced at the rearview mirror and froze. There, following me at an impossible distance, was another figure. Tall, thin, featureless except for the glint of what I could only describe as eyes. White, unblinking, reflecting the dim streetlights. My throat went dry. My pulse raced. I tried to shake it off, driving faster, weaving through the foggy road, desperate to reach the station. But the figure stayed. No matter how fast I went, no matter which turns I took, it followed. Always just at the edge of visibility, always watching. The fog seemed to thicken around it, like it controlled the environment. I tried honking, trying to get a reaction, but the sound was swallowed by the night. Nothing. Silence, except for the hum of the engine and the irregular beat of my own terrified heart. Then I saw them. More figures. At first I thought my mind was fracturing, but as I passed a dimly lit stretch of road I counted 3 more, each standing impossibly still at the roadside, staring. They didn't move when I drove past, didn't flinch. Just watching. My hands shook so violently I had trouble holding the wheel. My mind screamed at me to stop, to turn around, but I couldn't. Something compelled me forward, a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. I knew instinctively that stopping might be worse than moving. The fog thickened even more, rolling in waves so dense I could barely see 10 feet ahead. That's when I felt it. A presence vast and suffocating pressing down on the car, on me, as if the very air had become solid. My vision blurred, my breathing became shallow. The figures weren't just outside, they were inside my mind now, whispering, coaxing, taunting. Words formed in my head, alien and impossible, and yet I understood them. You shouldn't be here, leave or stay. Either is ours. I slammed my foot on the accelerator, trying to escape the invisible grip, but the road seemed endless. Every mile felt like an hour. Every turn looping back on itself. Panic consumed me. My phone was dead, no signal, no light, nothing. I was trapped. And then I noticed the reflections. Every puddle, every wet patch of asphalt mirrored the figures in impossible ways. Their faces, featureless, glowing, stared up at me from the road itself. My stomach turned, bile rising in my throat. I wanted to scream, but no sound would come out. The most terrifying moment came when I saw the bridge. I don't know why I took that route, why instinct didn't warn me, but the bridge loomed ahead, shrouded in fog. As I approached, the figures multiplied. Dozens now lining the road, their long limbs stretching across the guardrails, their eyes shining. The air grew colder, my breath fogging the windshield even though the heater was on full blast. And then I realized the bridge had no end. The asphalt dissolved into darkness and the fog thickened, swallowing everything. I was driving into nothingness, a void, and the figures moved silently beside me, keeping pace without effort. I wanted to stop. I begged for it, but my foot would not obey. The accelerator pressed against the floor as if by its own will. The shadows leaned closer, their shapes distorting, bending around the car like liquid darkness. Whispers escalated into a chorus of harsh, grating sounds that filled my ears. I couldn't tell if they were inside or outside my head. My vision blurred, reality twisting. The headlights flickered, revealing glimpses of forms that shouldn't exist. Bodies merging with bodies, faces stretching into grotesque smiles, eyes following me no matter where I looked. Somehow I survived. I don't know how, but after what felt like an eternity, the fog thinned, the bridge ended, and the road opened into a clearing. My car swerved off onto solid ground. I slammed it into park, heart pounding, hands shaking violently. The figures were gone. The fog receded, leaving only the ordinary, mundane world I remembered. The bridge, the road, the darkness, they were gone as if they had never existed. But I knew better. I knew what I had seen. I never returned to that road at night. I don't tell anyone what happened. Who would believe me? A hallucination? Exhaustion? Drugs? None of it fits. I know what I experienced. I felt their presence, heard their whispers, saw their impossible forms. I've tried to rationalize it, but logic fails when reality itself bends. Now, months later, I still see them sometimes. In the corner of my vision, in reflections, in the foggy nights when the wind howls just right, I catch glimpses. Eyes, limbs too long, shadows that stretch and twist unnaturally. I feel them, patient and aware, following me even when I drive safely through the city streets, even in the daylight. They are always there, waiting for the night, waiting for me to return to the roads that belong to them. And I know deep down that if I ever drive on that road again, I will not be able to escape. I will see the fog, I will see the figures, and I will hear the chorus of whispers telling me I was never meant to leave. That night I learned something I cannot unlearn. Some roads are not meant for us. Some darkness watches, waits, and remembers. And no matter how far we drive, no matter how fast, it will always be there. Patient, relentless, inevitable. It was a Tuesday night when it happened. I had just finished a late shift at a gas station on the outskirts of town and was driving back home alone along the old highway that cut through the hills. The air was cold, sharper than usual, and the moon was hidden behind thick clouds, leaving the road in near total darkness. The tires of my car hummed against the asphalt, the only sound other than the occasional gust of wind brushing through the trees. Normally, this drive was uneventful, almost soothing after a long night. But that night, something felt wrong. The first sign was subtle, a shadow darting across the road ahead. I slammed on the brakes instinctively, my heart jumping into my throat. There was nothing there. No deer, no stray animal, no person. Just the empty road, stretching ahead like a black ribbon. I tried to shake it off as fatigue, telling myself I'd been staring at the dimly lit highway for hours, and my mind was playing tricks. But a prickle ran up my spine, a sense of being watched that refused to leave. I pressed on, eyes straining against the darkness. The highway wound through a narrow valley, flanked by steep forested hills. I always hated this part of the drive because the trees closed in, their branches clawing at the edges of the road, and the shadows seemed to move in ways they shouldn't. That night, the trees were alive with whispers. I didn't hear actual words, just murmurs and hissing that danced at the edges of my perception. I told myself it was the wind, the rustling leaves, nothing more. But my instinct screamed otherwise. Then I saw it. A figure standing at the side of the road just beyond the reach of my headlights. At first I thought it was a hitchhiker, maybe a teenager trying to catch a ride home. But the way it stood, rigid, unnervingly still, set off alarms in my mind. My car slowed as I passed, and that's when I noticed its face. Featureless. Smooth, pale, without eyes, nose, or mouth. And yet somehow I could feel it looking at me. My stomach turned. My hands tightened on the wheel, white-knuckled. I couldn't look away, and I couldn't speed past either. A part of me wanted to flee, but another, darker part felt frozen in place, hypnotized by the impossible presence. I glanced into the rearview mirror, and my blood ran cold. Another figure had appeared in the distance behind me. And then another. And another. They multiplied, stretching along the road like a procession of the dead. Tall, thin, featureless, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Or maybe it was the faint light reflecting off something I couldn't identify. My pulse raced. I wanted to scream, but my voice refused to work. I pressed the accelerator, desperately trying to put distance between myself and whatever this was. But the road seemed to loop unnaturally, twisting in ways that made it feel like I wasn't going anywhere. That's when the first sound came. A low, guttural hum that seemed to vibrate inside the car, inside my chest. I couldn't tell if it was real or in my head. Then the whispers came, more insistent, forming words that I shouldn't have understood but somehow did. You shouldn't have come. You shouldn't have seen. You belong to us now. My hands shook uncontrollably. I tried to turn the radio on, any noise to drown it out, but static hissed through the speakers, punctuated by the same chilling whispering. The figures moved then, in ways that defied physics. They glided across the road without touching it, stretching and bending like liquid shadows. One of them reached out, a long, impossibly thin arm that seemed to extend for meters, scraping against the side of my car. I felt the metal shiver, heard a screeching sound that made my teeth rattle. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst, and yet I couldn't look away from the mirror. The procession behind me stretched into the fog, endless and patient, waiting for me to falter. Panic overwhelmed me. I didn't know what I was doing, only that I needed to escape. I veered off the road onto a narrow dirt path, hoping to lose them in the trees. But the figures didn't follow the road, they followed me. They were everywhere, emerging from the fog, the darkness, the shadows between the trees. No matter which turn I took, no matter how fast I drove, they were always there, patient, silent, watching. Then I saw a movement in the forest to my right. Something crouched low, almost indistinguishable from the darkness itself. It leapt onto the road, gliding without effort, landing directly in front of my car. I swerved violently, tires skidding on loose gravel. I barely avoided hitting it, but when I looked back, it was gone. The trees were still, the fog heavy, and yet the sensation of being observed never left. Minutes, or was it hours? Later, I stumbled onto an old service road that led to a clearing. The figures were still behind me, lingering at the edges of visibility, and I felt a chill crawl down my spine. I realized with a sinking, sickening certainty that they didn't need me to stop. They didn't need me to confront them. They only needed me to be afraid. They fed on the terror, the helplessness, the knowledge that I could not outrun them. I parked in the clearing, engine running, and sat frozen. The figures didn't advance further. They just waited, patient and relentless. I dared not exit the car. My phone was dead, no signal, no help, no escape. I was trapped in this place, in this moment with them. I tried to convince myself it was a dream, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. But the cold seeping through the windows, the metallic hum, the whispering, it was all too real. Eventually, the fog began to thin, the figures retreating just enough that I felt marginally safe. I drove the rest of the way home without incident, the road now ordinary, mundane, deceptively normal. But the memory of that night clung to me like a second skin. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think. I avoided that highway entirely, taking longer routes, never traveling alone at night again. And yet, the terror didn't leave. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see the featureless faces, the glowing eyes, the impossibly long limbs stretching across the road. I hear the whispers, low and insistent, calling me back, warning me, promising me things I cannot understand. I feel them in my peripheral vision, a presence hovering just beyond the edge of my reality. The most terrifying part? I've begun to notice signs in my daily life, shadows that linger too long, reflections in windows that don't match my movements, sounds in empty rooms that vanish the instant I turn my head. They are patient, they wait, and I know deep down that one night, if I ever drive along that road again, I won't make it past the fog. I'll see them fully then. I'll feel their cold, featureless faces staring at me, their impossible forms surrounding me. And I will realize too late that some roads are not meant to be traveled, and some shadows are not meant to be escaped. I still drive. I still move through the world. But I never go out at night. I avoid dark roads entirely. I don't know if I was lucky or cursed, but I know this. They are still out there, waiting, watching, patient. And one day they will find me again, and when they do, I won't be able to run.